The battlefield was silent now. Only smoke and fire remained. Dead machines and broken ships lay everywhere, their metal twisted and burned. Human soldier Eli walked carefully through the wreckage, his boots crunching glass and ash he had seen many battles before, but this one felt different, colder. The enemy had attacked fast, without warning, and disappeared just as quickly. Now Eli searched for survivors. Even though he didn't expect to find any, his scanner beeped softly, showing a weak life signal nearby. He followed it through broken walls and shattered crates until he reached a collapsed cargo bay. Something moved beneath the metal, just slightly. He stepped closer, lifted a sharp beam, and froze. There, under the wreckage, was an alien girl. She had cuts on her face and dried blood on her skin. Her long silver hair was tangled, her arms chained to a broken pipe. She looked half dead, but her glowing violet eyes opened slowly and locked onto his. She whispered, her voice shaking, "Take me with you, or leave me to die." Eli didn't answer right away. He looked around. No one else was nearby, just silence. She was from the enemy's side. That much was clear, but something in her voice didn't sound like a soldier. "Why are you chained?" he asked, stepping closer. She coughed, then spoke again. "I'm not one of them. Not really. I was given to them. Traded." Her words were slow, but honest. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. Eli's cum crackled in his ear. "Report, Eli, did you find anything?" He stayed quiet for a moment, then answered, "No survivors, just debris." He shut the cum off quickly. Couldn't explain what he was about to do. Not to his team, not even to himself. "Can you walk?" he asked her. She shook her head. "My legs. I think they're broken." Eli cursed under his breath, then bent down and lifted her gently. She gasped in pain, but didn't scream. She just held onto his armor weakly and closed her eyes as he carried her through the smoking ruins. He felt something heavy in his chest. Was it guilt? Was it fear? He didn't know, but he knew he couldn't leave her there. Not like that. Not alone. Not when she begged for life at the extraction zone. His team was loading up wounded soldiers and collecting tech parts. Eli kept his back turned, moving quickly to a supply truck. He opened the back and laid her down behind old boxes and blankets. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "I'll come back when it's safe." She nodded, her breath shallow but steady. Her chains clinked softly as she moved her hand toward his. "Thank you," she whispered. Eli didn't answer. He just closed the truck door and walked away. Inside the base, no one suspected anything. He acted like normal, cleaned his gear, answered questions, filed reports. But his mind was somewhere else, in that truck, with her. Every hour he checked that no one had found her. That night, under darkness, he slipped out with food and medicine. She was still there, her body shaking from cold. He gave her water, covered her with a jacket, and treated her wounds as best as he could. Her name, she said, was Selah. She didn't know if her people even cared. She was gone. "They used me like a tool," she said, staring at the ceiling. "I never wanted this war." Eli sat beside her, silent, listening. He had seen many enemies, but she didn't feel like one. He knew this choice would lead to trouble. But he also knew something else. He couldn't turn his back now, not after what he saw in her eyes. Not after her whisper in the wreckage. The next morning, alarms rang through the base. Someone reported movement near the edge of the field. Eli's heart beat faster. If they found her, it would be the end for both of them. But for now, she was safe, and he had made his choice. He had taken her with him, and everything was about to change. Eli didn't sleep much that night. Every little sound outside made him tense. He kept checking the storage truck where Selah was hidden, wrapped in old blankets and shivering quietly. She didn't complain, not even once, just stared at him with tired eyes every time he opened the door. It was like she was afraid he would disappear if she blinked too long. He brought her real food. This time, not just rations, but a warm sandwich and a bottle of clean water. She looked at it like it was treasure, her hands shaking as she held it. Eli sat nearby and watched her eat in silence. He still didn't understand what he was doing or why. Only that he couldn't leave her in that battlefield. Not after what she said after a while. She spoke. Her voice was still weak, but clearer than before. She said she had been taken from her home as a child, sold to the enemy army by her own kind because of her rare blood. They thought it would earn them favor with the warlords, but instead, she was locked away and used as a translator. Sometimes, as a trophy, listened carefully, trying to match her words with what he knew about her species. They were supposed to be dangerous, ruthless, cold. But nothing about Selah felt like that, even when her skin glowed softly in the dark, even when her strange markings shifted like they were alive. All he saw was someone scared and tired and alone. The bass was getting louder now, people whispering about something strange. Someone had reported strange movements during the night. Patrols were being doubled, and officers were starting to suspect something. Eli knew he didn't have much time. He went to the medical wing and stole some painkillers and healing spray, hoping no one saw him. Then he returned to the truck and helped Selah apply it to her legs. Her wince was quick, but her small smile. After that made him pause. It was the first time she smiled since he found her. "You don't have to do this," she whispered, her fingers gently touching his hand. "They'll hurt you if they find me." Eli looked at her and said, "Then they better not find you." That night, a soldier named Harlan approached Eli near the mess hall. He was young, and too curious for his own good. He asked if Eli had seen anything strange on his last patrol. Said the scanners had picked up a heat signature near the East Wreck Zone. Eli kept his face calm and said he saw nothing, just broken metal and ash. But Harlan didn't seem convinced later, when Eli returned to the truck. He noticed something strange. The blankets were moved, the back door slightly open. He panicked and jumped inside, ready for the worst. But Selah was still there, hiding under the bench. Her body curled tight. She looked up at him and whispered, "Someone tried to open it, but I stayed quiet. I didn't move." Eli clenched his jaw. They were too close now. He knew it was time to move her. He couldn't keep her in the base any longer. Not with curious soldiers walking around and scanners sweeping the area. There was an old supply tunnel that hadn't been used in years. It led beyond the perimeter wall to the forest. He waited until the middle of the night. The guard change was slow, and the cameras on the east side glitched often. He wrapped Selah in a cargo cloak and helped her walk slowly through the shadows. Every step made her wince, but she didn't make a sound, just held on to him and kept going. They reached the tunnel entrance, rusted and half covered in vines. Eli pried it open and helped her inside. It smelled like oil and old metal, but it was safe, for now, halfway through the tunnel, Eli stopped suddenly. He heard something, a footstep behind them, echoing softly. He turned quickly, gun raised, but saw nothing. Still, his instincts screamed at him. Someone had followed them. He pushed Selah ahead faster, heart pounding. They reached the end of the tunnel, just as a shadow moved behind them. Eli threw a flash beacon behind him, lighting up the tunnel for a moment. But there was nothing there, only silence. Again they climbed out into the cold air, the forest dark and quiet, and Eli led her toward an old outpost he remembered from a past mission. It wasn't much, just a roof, some walls, and a broken panel, but it would keep them safe for the night. As Selah curled up on an old mat, Eli sat beside the entrance, weapon in hand, watching the trees. His mind raced with questions. Had someone really followed them? Or was it his fear playing tricks? But deep down, he knew one thing for sure. The longer she stayed with him, the more danger they would face. And yet, for some reason, he didn't understand. He couldn't imagine leaving her behind. He had already chosen once to take her with him, and now there was no turning back. The outpost was falling apart, metal walls rusted and broken, old lights flickering. But to Eli and Selah, it was better than the battlefield, better than chains and cold trucks, here at least. They could breathe without fear for a moment. Keely started a small fire using old supplies, enough to keep them warm without drawing attention. Selah sat close to the flames, her knees pulled to her chest, her silver hair messy, her violet eyes watching him with quiet trust. Neither of them spoke much that night. Words felt heavy, unneeded. Eli sat near the entrance, his rifle on his lap, eyes fixed on the dark forest beyond. He didn't like the silence. It felt like something was waiting out there. Selah leaned her head against the wall and whispered, "When I was a child, I thought stars were spirits. I used to name them and tell them my dreams." Eli turned his head slightly, surprised by the softness in her voice. "What did you dream of?" he asked. She gave a tired smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. Freedom. He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. He just watched her for a while longer, wondering how many others like her were trapped in this war. Silenced, forgotten, used hours passed slowly. Then Eli's eyes caught a flicker between the trees, a light too steady for fire, too low for stars. He reached for his scope and peered through it. His breath stopped. Bounty hunters, 3 of them, moving quietly, armored in black with green visors glowing faintly. They were scanning the area. One of them knelt near the ground, touching it, tracking something. Lai pulled away from the scope and whispered sharply, "We have to move now." Selah didn't ask why. She saw it in his face, fear not for himself, but for her. She grabbed the small pack and stood. Still limping, but stronger than before, they slipped out the back of the outpost, careful not to break twigs or make noise. The fire was left behind, dying in the wind. The bounty hunters were getting closer. Eli could hear their muffled voices. Through their masks, distorted and cold, he led Selah down a narrow path, through tangled roots and thick fog. But the hunters were faster, trained, ruthless. One of them spotted movement and raised a silent signal. A red laser flashed past Eli's head and hit a tree with a sizzling crack. Day. "We're under fire now." Eli pushed Selah forward and turned to shoot back, hitting one of the hunters in the leg. The figure fell with a grunt. But the others kept coming, their footsteps fast, their weapons silent but deadly. Selah stumbled and fell, her leg giving out. Eli rushed to lift her again, but another blast hit the ground beside them, throwing them both to the dirt. Selah gasped and covered her head. Trembling, Eli crawled too, her blood running down his arm. He had been grazed, but not badly. He looked at her, saw the panic in her eyes, and forced himself to smile. "We're not dying here," he said. He reached into his bag and pulled out the flare grenade. Old tech, but useful. He clicked it once. The core inside started glowing hot. He kissed her forehead without thinking and whispered, "Close your eyes." Then he rolled the grenade toward the hunters and turned away. Massive flash lit up the night, blinding white and red light, followed by a crack like thunder. Even from behind the trees, it burned the eyes. The hunters screamed and dropped their weapons. Disoriented, Lai didn't wait. He grabbed Selah and pulled her up again, dragging her through the bushes toward a rocky hill, each step harder than the last, his strength fading. Her breath shallow, they reached a small cave behind the rocks and collapsed inside. Hidden by thick branches, Selah crawled beside him, her hands on his chest, his shirt wet with blood. "You're hurt," she whispered, her voice shaking. Lai looked at her with a tired grin. "You noticed?" She pressed her glowing fingers to the wound. Her skin shimmered faintly. A soft pulse of light moved into him. The pain dulled for a moment, not gone, but easier. He stared at her in awe. "What was that?" Selah closed her eyes and said, "A gift, but it only works if I really care about someone." Eli blinked, silent for a moment outside. The hunters were still looking, shouting in a language he didn't understand, but he didn't care. Not now, he touched her hand gently and whispered. Then I guess I'll have to stay alive, if only to thank you. She smiled softly. Her fingers still on his chest, and for the first time since the battlefield, her eyes looked peaceful. The hunt wasn't over, and the danger wasn't gonna butt, in that moment, in that cave. A bond was formed and nothing would break it now. Rain fell softly over the forest, tapping leaves, soaking the ground, washing away footprints and blood. Inside the narrow cave, Eli stirred first, wincing as he sat up, his arms still wrapped in bandages, still burning beneath. But the worst had passed, thanks to her. Selah lay beside him, curled into herself like a child, her breath slow and calm, her silver hair messy and damp, one hand still resting near his. Even in sleep, she didn't drift far from him, as if some part of her believed he might vanish if she let go. He looked at her for a long moment, wondering again what fate brought them together in that wreckage. She should have died there, forgotten like the others. But now she was here, breathing, alive, and maybe, just maybe, safer but not for long. He stepped outside the cave quietly, guns slung across his back, eyes scanning the trees. The hunters were gone, their trail cold. But Eli knew better than to believe they'd given up. Bounty hunters never did. Not for a prize like her. He returned to the cave and shook her gently. She woke quickly, eyes blinking wide, then focused on him with silent understanding. They didn't need words anymore, just looks, and they both knew it was time to move again. Their path took them deeper into the woods, where sunlight barely touched the ground, roots twisted like claws, and fog hung low like a ghost. Eli helped her walk, one arm under her shoulders, her steps slow but steady, each one stronger than before. They came across a broken outpost, half buried in moss and vines, once a field station during the early years of the war, now just a skeleton of rust and memory. Eli led her inside, clearing debris, lighting a small heat core to keep them warm. Inside was quiet, almost too quiet, but they were exhausted and had no choice. Selah sat on a crate while Eli tried to fix the door, his fingers numb from cold. She watched him with a tilted head, her expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have taken me," she said softly, breaking the silence. "You could have walked away and no one would have blamed you." Eli didn't turn, just kept working, his voice low. "Maybe I should have, but I didn't, and I won't." She lowered her gaze, her fingers tracing a faded mark on the crate. "I was born in a place like this, metal walls, no sky. I didn't see real stars until I was 12. He paused at that, slowly looking back at her. "You ever think about going home?" he asked. Her smile was sad. Small home is just a word when no one waits for you there. Those words hit deeper than she realized. Eli had fought in 5 campaigns, watched good friends die for flags and orders. But in the end, what waited for him back home? An empty apartment, metals in a drawer, silence. The heat core flickered, casting warm light across her skin. Her eyes shimmered, not just from the light, but something else. Something softer. Eli sat beside her, not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel her warmth. He pulled out an old music chip, something he'd carried since his first tour. Placed it in the player he repaired long ago. Soft earth melodies filled the outpost. A song from a time before war, before aliens, before broken people found each other. In Kavasala tilted her head, the music strange and gentle. "What is this?" she asked. "Something my mother used to play," he said, staring at the wall. She said it helped her sleep. Selah leaned her head back, eyes closing slowly, and whispered, "Then don't stop it for a moment." It felt like the war didn't exist, like they were just 2 souls hiding from the rain. letting the song carry their pain somewhere far away. But peace never lasts. A low beep came from Eli's old tracker. Weak signals, someone nearby. Someone broadcasting a local ping, not military. Not official mercenaries. Ellie grabbed his gear fast, pulled the core out of the wall, and helped Selah up. They're scanning the forest. We need to go, she nodded, but her body trembled again. Too cold, too weak. Eli cursed under his breath and pulled off his jacket. Wrapping it around her, she tried to protest, but he shook his head. You freeze. I slow down. We both lose. Outside, the wind howled, carrying static and danger with it. They moved fast through the undergrowth, hearts racing, breath tighten. The distance, the scanner beeped again, closer this time, and then a voice distorted. Robotic male, speaking into the open air, return the asset, and you will not be harmed. Selah froze, her eyes wide with terror. They know I'm with you. Eli gripped his rifle, jaw tight. Then they'll have to go through me. She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. Why do you care so much? He stared at her, and for the first time, answered honestly. Because someone should have cared for you a long time ago. And in that moment, in the middle of the storm, something unspoken passed between them. Wasn't just about survival. Annie Marie was about saving what was left of her soul land, maybe his too. The forest was alive with danger. Every tree hiding a shadow, every gust of wind carrying the whisper of death. Eli knew they were surrounded, not just by nature, but by hunters. Mercenaries who didn't care about right or wrong, only profit. He crouched behind a fallen log, watching through his scope. 3 heat signatures moved between the trees. One of them carried a tracking drone, small and fast, blinking with red light once it locked onto Selah's biosignature. They wouldn't stop until they had her in chains or in pieces. Selah sat low behind him, her body trembling from exhaustion and cold, but her eyes sharp with fear and fury. She knew what would happen if they caught her again, and this time, there would be no chance of escape. Eli handed her a small pulse detonator, barely charged but still functional. Only use this if I go down, he said quietly, trying to smile. Just throw it and run. She stared at the device in her palm, then looked up at him. I'm not running without you. He wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. Movement flashed to their left. The first merc stepped into view, tall, armored, and silent. His weapon pointed toward the clearing. Eli fired fast, hitting the man in the shoulder, sending him crashing into the mud. The other 2 responded instantly. Firing sonic darts and stun bolts, trees exploded with bursts of energy, bark flying like shrapnel. Eli pulled Selah behind a thick root and returned fire. His arm burning from the effort. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of cover. Stun bolts struck the ground inches from Selah's leg. Splashing blue light across her skin, she yelped and fell, her breath knocked from her lungs. Eli rushed to her, dragging her behind a boulder, shielding her with his body. Blood dripped from his side now. His jacket torn open, breath ragged, pain shooting up his ribs with every movement. But he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Selah reached up, touched the wound gently, her hand glowing faintly again, trying to heal him, but he pushed her hand away. You need that energy more than I do, he growled, forcing a grin. I'll survive, promise. More footsteps closed in. The drone zipped past overhead, scanning fast. Selah suddenly grabbed the detonator and clutched it tight, her expression strange, calm, and fierce all at once. She stood, exposed, her hair glowing faintly in the dusk. I'm the one you want, she shouted into the trees. Leave him and take me. Eli's heart stopped as he turned toward her. Selah. No. Too late. A beam shot from the nearest tree line and hit her square in the chest, throwing her back into the mud, her body limp, eyes closed. The detonator rolling from her fingers. Eli screamed. something inside him snapping like glass under pressure. He rose from cover and charged the shooters. Without thinking, his rifle blazing, the Merc with the drone fell first. The drone crashing into the dirt in a burst of sparks. Another took a shot at him, and Miss Teely didn't ended fast. Messy, brutal, and when the smoke cleared, Eli stood in the center, shaking. Blood dripping from his chin, the forest silent. Again he dropped his weapon and ran to Selah's side, falling to his knees. Lifting her gently from the ground. "Hey," he whispered, voice cracked and breaking. "Come on, don't do this." She didn't move. He pressed his ear to her chest. Nothing then. Faintly, just barely, he heard it. A slow, soft heartbeat. Her chest glowed again, just a little. And her lips parted with a shallow breath. She was alive. Eli laughed. A broken sound filled with pain and relief. He held her close, his hands cradling her face. "You idiot," he whispered. "You don't get to leave me like that, Silas." Eyes fluttered open, and she smiled weakly. "You didn't run." He shook his head. "Neither did you." They lay there together in the quiet for a long time, surrounded by the smell of smoke, blood, and wet leaves. But it felt like peace later. Eli found enough strength to build a small fire, warm and soft. He covered Selah with what was left of his jacket and sat beside her. The stars now showing through the broken clouds above, she reached out and touched his hand, her voice low. "I would have died happy if I knew you were safe." Eli looked at her, voice thick. "Don't talk like that. You're not dying, not while I'm breathing." She laughed quietly. "Just once, then I'll stay awake, just to annoy you." He smiled. And for a moment, everything was still but far away, beyond the hills, beyond the trees. The radio on Eli's belt crackled with a voice. "Eli, come in. Where the hell are you?" Trouble was coming again, but this time, they'd face it together. Eli stared at the radio like it was a snake coiled in his hand. The voice kept repeating his name, louder now, angrier. It was the base commander, calling for answers, calling for a soldier who wasn't coming back. He clicked the radio off without saying a word. Selah sat beside the fire, her hands still shaking slightly, her body wrapped in the remains of Eli's jacket, her skin pale from blood loss and cold, but her eyes were alive, sharp, steady, watching him. "What did they say?" She asked softly. "They're looking for me," Eli replied, dropping the radio into the fire. The plastic crackled, melting slow. "And soon they'll come looking harder." A long silence followed. Selah spoke, without looking up. "You should go back, say I escaped. Tell them I tricked you. They might believe it." Eli crouched beside her, his voice low, rough. "Even if they believed it, I wouldn't. And I don't run from the people I choose to protect." She turned her face toward him, her expression unreadable outside. Morning was rising slow, the fog lifting to reveal distant hills painted in gray and blue. They were close to the old ridge border. Beyond that was neutral ground, unclaimed space. A few hidden colonies, smugglers, and people who asked no questions, but the path there was dangerous where someone else had already found it. Tilly spotted the sign first. A flare shell embedded in a tree, marked with a mercenary seal. Not bounty hunters this time, military contractors. Paid by governments, ruthless, cold, efficient, they're cutting off the ridge. He said, scanning the map he downloaded years ago. "We've got 2 hours to cross before it's sealed off." Selah tried to stand, but stumbled, her strength nearly gone. He caught her before she hit the ground. She looked up at him. Voice thin, "I'm slowing you down." He shook his head. "You're the reason I'm still moving." He carried her most of the way, his boots slipping in the mud. Every breath like fire in his chest, his wounds reopened, blood leaking through bandages. But he didn't stop, not even once they reached the cliff by midday. A broken bridge stretched across the gap, old metal plates shaking in the wind. Half the ropes already snapped. Below was a jagged river, fast, and Black Sela's eyes widened. "We'll never make it across." Eli set her down gently on the grass, studied the bridge, calculated the weight. The distance, the drop. He turned back to her. "You trust me?" He asked. She nodded. He pulled a safety cable from his pack, tied one end to her waist and the other to his belt, then lifted her into his arms again with each step on the bridge. The metal groaned, ropes creaked, pieces snapped and fell. The wind screamed like a warning, but Eli kept going, eyes forward, feet steady. The world behind him no longer mattered halfway across. The cable snapped from the far side. They felt the world turn sideways, reached out and caught a steel beam with one hand. His body swinging beneath, Selah clinging to him. The roar of the river below, waiting to swallow them both. He didn't scream. He just held on. He pulled her up slowly, inch by inch, until she was safe on the beam, then pulled himself up next to her. His muscles screaming, his vision blurry, they crawled the rest of the way to the far side. Collapsed on the rocks, breathing hard, laughing through the pains, La touched his face gently. Her fingers glowing faint. "You should have let go," she whispered. Delay looked at her and smiled. "Then I wouldn't get to hear you say that." Behind them, the bridge collapsed completely ahead. The path was clear. They followed the trail to a hidden shelter built long ago. A cabin buried under earth and roots. Eli had stayed there during a Black Ops recon mission years back. Now it would be their refuge. Inside was dusty but safe. A generator hummed quietly, lights flickering on as he activated the backup power. Selah curled on the cot, exhausted, her hands still in his. Even in sleep Eli watched her. Then opened the old locker near the wall. Inside were civilian IDs, stolen tech, credits, and something he hadn't touched in years. A fresh start. He stared at his own name on the tag, then slowly tore it off. She had called him a protector, a fool, a risk, but now he was something else. He was her choice and she was his reason. The stars above were clearer than Eli had ever seen them. No smoke, no searchlights, no warplanes crossing the sky. Just silence, wide and open. As if the universe had finally taken a deep breath and paused inside the hidden cabin. Selah lay under a faded thermal blanket, her skin pale but peaceful for the first time since they met. There was no fear in her eyes, just calm. Just trust. Eli sat beside her, holding a small cup of warm broth, coaxing her to sip. Her fingers brushed his when she took it, and he didn't pull away. 3 days had passed since they escaped across the broken bridge. No more signals, no more footsteps in the dark. Just the quiet hum of the old generator and the sound of 2 people still alive. He had changed his clothes, cut his hair with a survival blade, burned his old ID in the stove, and watched the ashes curl like dry leaves. The soldier named Eli was gone now. What remained was a man sitting beside someone he refused to lose. Selah looked at him with sleepy eyes, her voice soft like wind through leaves. "Why didn't you leave when you had the chance?" Eli chuckled low. "Because you ruined me?" She smiled gently. "How?" He leaned back, arms crossed behind his head. "You made me care." Later that evening, she stood for the first time without help. Legs weak but steady, she walked to the cabin door and opened it slowly, letting cold air rush in. She looked at the stars like they were old friends returning home. "You once told me you used to name them," Eli said from behind her. She nodded. "I stopped when I thought no one would hear me anymore." "Then maybe," he whispered, stepping beside her, "it's time to start again." Her eyes shimmered as she pointed to one star, then another, giving them soft names in her old tongue, each word slow and filled with memory. Eli listened, like each name mattered, like each sound carried a piece of her heart. They stood there until morning. Then came the knock, soft at first. Then Louderly's hand went to his weapon, out of habit. But Selah placed her hand over his, shaking her head when they opened the door. It wasn't soldiers or mercenaries, it was a woman and 2 children, alien-like Selah, covered in mud and fear. Behind them stood a human smuggler Eli had helped once during the early days of the war. The woman spoke quickly, eyes darting there. "Hunting anyone who runs. We heard there was a place here. Someone who helps." Selah looked at Eli. He didn't say a word. He just stepped aside that night. The cabin was fuller, warmer, blankets spread across the floor, strange languages mixing with laughter, tired faces lit by firelight. And in the middle of it all, Selah sat beside Eli, her head resting on his shoulder. "You could have built a new life anywhere." She said he looked around the room, listened to the sound of children finally sleeping safe, and whispered, "I did." And just like that, the man who once walked alone through wreckage and ruin now stood at the center of something new, something fragile and worth protecting. A warfighter, not a deserter, but a keeper of promises. A shelter for the broken human who once made a choice to save a life and, in return, found one.